The hospital called it stable. The doctor used that word the way people use fine, carefully, deliberately, in a way that means anything but. My daughter's fever had climbed to 104.8 degrees in less than 3 hours, and by the time the nurses got her hooked up to the monitors and the IV lines threaded into her tiny arm, I had stopped feeling my own heartbeat. I was just watching hers. That was the night everything changed. Not the fever. Not the hospital. What changed me? What cracked something open in my chest that I don't think will ever fully close again? Was a text message. One text message, sent by my own mother, delivered to a family group chat directly beneath my unanswered update that my child was in the ICU. I want you to understand something before I tell you what that message said. I want you to understand the kind of woman I had spent 34 years becoming, the kind of woman who doesn't ask for help, who handles things, who wires money before anyone finishes the sentence, who shows up, who absorbs, who quietly makes herself the load-bearing wall of every room she walks into. I want you to understand that woman because she is the reason that text message hit me the way it did. And I want you to understand her because she is the woman I left in that hospital hallway. Before we go any further, if you're new here, hit subscribe and tap that bell right now, because the stories I tell on this channel, they don't go where you think they're going, and I need you here for the whole thing. If this one already has your attention, go ahead and drop a like. It genuinely helps more than you know. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was a Tuesday in late October, and I remember the cold because Claire had been fighting a low-grade fever since Saturday. Nothing alarming, 101, 101.2. The kind of fever a parent learns to monitor with one eye while living their life with the other. I gave her children's Tylenol, made sure she was drinking water, kept her home from first grade on Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, I thought we'd turned a corner. She ate half a grilled cheese sandwich and asked to watch a movie, and something in my chest loosened. I put her to bed at 7:30, checked her temperature at 9, 101.9, still manageable. I set an alarm for midnight and fell asleep on the couch with the baby monitor on the cushion beside me. I don't know exactly what woke me at 2:15. It wasn't the alarm. That hadn't gone off yet. It was something quieter than that. A mother's instinct is not a mystical thing. It is a finely tuned instrument built from years of listening to a particular person breathe. And something in the way Claire was breathing had changed. I was in her room in under 10 seconds. She was burning. Not warm, not feverish. Burning. Her skin was the kind of hot that makes your hand recoil. Her lips were dry. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, had a glassy, faraway quality that I had never seen in her before, and that I pray I never see again. The thermometer read 104.6. By the time I carried her to the car, it was 104.8. I have driven that route to Riverside General Hospital exactly twice in my life. The first time, I was the one in the back seat. I was 7 years old with a broken wrist from falling out of a tree, and my father drove while my mother held my hand. I remember thinking that the red lights looked like lanterns in the rain. The second time, I was the one driving. Claire was in the back seat. The hazard lights were on. I ran 2 red lights and I do not apologize for either of them. I don't remember parking the car. I remember the emergency room entrance, the automatic doors, the fluorescent blast of white light, a nurse who moved toward us immediately, who had clearly seen this before, who took one look at Claire's face and said, "Come with me," without breaking stride. I remember thinking, distantly, that I should call someone, that someone in my family should know what was happening, that I shouldn't be alone for this. But I didn't call, because calling people is a habit you lose when you've spent long enough being the person everyone else calls. They moved Claire to a pediatric ICU room just after 3 in the morning. Possible septic complication from an undetected infection. The doctor explained it with the kind of clinical precision that simultaneously reassures you and terrifies you. They would run more tests. They would monitor her closely. They were, he said carefully, cautiously, optimistic. I sat in the chair beside her bed and watched the monitor. The green line of her heartbeat. The numbers that meant her blood pressure and her oxygen and her temperature. I learned to read those numbers the way you learn to read a weather system. Always looking for the next change. Always calculating what it means. At 3:12 in the morning, I sent one message to the family group chat. I chose my words carefully because I am the kind of person who chooses words carefully even when I am falling apart. I wrote, "Claire is in the ICU at Riverside General. They're watching for a possible infection complication. I'll update as I know more. Then I put the phone face down on the chair beside me and went back to watching my daughter breathe. I didn't expect anyone to respond at 3 in the morning. My mother, Ruth, goes to bed at 10. My father, Frank, follows shortly after. My brother Derek, who had just returned from his honeymoon 2 days prior, kept unpredictable hours but was probably asleep. I told myself all of this. I repeated it like a mantra every time I looked at the phone and saw no response. By 7 in the morning, I had memorized the ceiling tiles. I had memorized the sound of each of the monitors, learned to distinguish which beep was Claire's and which belonged to the room next door. A nurse named Angela brought me a cup of coffee I hadn't asked for. She set it on the table beside me without a word and smiled the way people smile when they know nothing. They say will help but they want to try anyway. I almost lost it right there, not from fear, not from exhaustion, from that small, unasked for kindness. Something about being seen without having to perform okayness first. I picked up my phone. Checked the group chat. Nothing. I set it back down. By 9, I had called Claire's school to let them know she wouldn't be in. By 10, I had emailed my supervisor a short, professional note that said I had a family medical situation and would be unreachable. By 11, the doctor had come back with slightly better news. The fever had dropped a fraction of a degree and her blood counts were trending in the right direction. Not out of the woods, but no longer deeper in. I exhaled for what felt like the first time since 2 in the morning. Then I picked up my phone again. Noon had come and gone. My mother sends a good morning text to the family group chat every single day. Not occasionally, every day. She has done this for years. Cheerful messages, motivational quotes, photographs of her morning garden. On a normal day, she would have texted by 9. The chat was silent. There is a particular quality to deliberate silence that is different from ordinary quiet. You feel it. It has a texture. And I am 34 years old and I know the people in that chat the way you only know people you've spent your entire life trying to love. And what I felt in that silence was not confusion. What I felt was recognition. They had seen my message. They just hadn't responded. And I sat with that fact in a hospital chair beside my sedated 6-year-old daughter, and I let it settle where it needed to settle. At 4:47 in the afternoon, 13 hours and 35 minutes after I had sent that message, my phone buzzed. I picked it up. Relief flooded me for half a second. Just half a second. It was my mother. A message in the group chat, posted directly below my unanswered update from the night before. Hey sweetheart, I know you're busy but Derek and Marcus's resort final payment is due by tomorrow morning. It's $7,000. You're doing so well lately. It would mean so much to him. Let me know. Love you. I read it once. I read it again. I looked up at the screen above Claire's bed. Her fever read 102.1, down from 104.8. Down, but not gone. Not safe. Not out of the woods. I read the message a third time. And then I did something I had never done in 34 years of being Sarah Holloway. I put the phone back down without responding, opened my banking app and started making decisions. Here is what you need to understand about my family. We are not a cruel family. I want to be honest about that, because cruelty would have been easier to name, easier to leave. My mother loves me. I genuinely believe that. My father loves me. My brother loves me in the distracted, self-absorbed way of someone who has always known he was loved unconditionally and has never had to work very hard to earn it. The problem was never hatred. The problem was architecture. 2 weeks before Claire ended up in the ICU, my brother Derek had gotten married. A beautiful outdoor wedding, barn venue, string lights, a band instead of a DJ, a florist who charged like she was arranging flowers for a royal wedding. Derek and Marcus had planned the whole thing, booked the whole thing, committed to the whole thing. And then, as tends to happen when you live your financial life with optimism in place of arithmetic, they came up a little short. The venue deposit, $3,500, had come due 3 months out, and Derek was $400 short. My mother had mentioned it on a phone call, casually. The way you mention the weather. Derek's a little stressed about the venue deposit, you know how he gets. I had sent the full amount within the hour, not $400. The full $3,500, because that is what I do, because it is faster to fix it than to watch someone I love stress about it. The catering overage had come up 6 weeks later, $1,800. Once again, my mother had mentioned it on a call. Once again, I had sent the money before the call was over. She had thanked me in a tone that managed to be both genuinely warm and entirely unsurprised. The honeymoon itself, the resort where $7,000 was now apparently due, I had not contributed to. Not because I hadn't been asked, I simply hadn't been asked yet. $7,000. 2 weeks after a wedding, I had already paid $5,300 toward, and 13 hours after telling them my daughter was in the ICU. I sat in that hospital chair and did math I had never let myself do before. I scrolled back through my bank statements, not looking for something exactly, just looking. 3 years ago, my father had retired early. A combination of a back injury that had made his job painful and a mutual decision he and my mother had made that they were tired. I understood. I had not questioned it. 2 months into his retirement, my mother had called to let me know things were a little tight. I had offered to set up a monthly transfer while they found their footing. That was 36 months ago. $2,000 a month, every first of the month, for 36 months. $72,000. I sat with that number in a fluorescent-lit hospital room and I felt something I can only describe as the floor shifting. Not the anger. That came later. First there was just this profound, disorienting rearrangement of things I thought I knew. Things I thought were help. Things I thought were temporary. They had restructured their retirement around my transfers. Not supplemented, restructured. I was a line item in their monthly budget. I was planned for. And what I finally understood sitting there was that I had taught them to plan for me. Every time I had said yes without being asked. Every time I had filled a gap before anyone finished describing it. Every time I had absorbed a crisis so efficiently that it stopped feeling like a crisis and started feeling like a system, I had built something. A structure. A quiet, invisible architecture in which my income was a shared resource and my consent was assumed. I hadn't been helping my family. I had been funding them. And the message about the honeymoon wasn't a coincidence or poor timing or a mother who didn't realize. It was the system operating exactly as it had been designed to operate. Sarah will handle it. Sarah always handles it. Sarah is doing well. I navigated to the recurring transfer in my banking app. I looked at it for a long time. Then I pressed cancel. The confirmation screen read, "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I pressed yes. Then I opened my contacts and I blocked my mother's number. Not in anger. I want to be precise about this. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. What I felt was not rage. It was the particular clarity that arrives when you have finally stopped lying to yourself about something that has been true for a very long time. I put the phone back in my pocket and I turned back to my daughter. The nurse came in to check her vitals. She smiled at me in that way Angela had smiled that morning. Quietly, without performance. "She's holding," she said. "That's what we want to see." I nodded. I held on to those 3 words like a rope. The following morning, my father called 6 times before I was fully awake. I had managed a few hours of broken sleep in the chair, and I sat up with the phone buzzing in my hand, watching the missed calls stack up. Frank, Frank, Frank. 6 times in under 2 hours. On the 7th call, I stood up, kissed Claire's forehead very gently so as not to wake her, and walked out into the corridor. The hallway outside the ICU has a particular quality of light that I have thought about many times since. Fluorescent, overhead, utterly without warmth. The kind of light that makes everyone look like they haven't slept in days. I answered on the 3rd ring. "What is going on?" My father's voice, when he's upset, does not rise. It compresses, gets tight and deliberate. He saves it for moments he considers serious. "Good morning, Dad." "Don't, Sarah, what is going on?" "You cancelled the transfer." "I did. We were counting on that." I leaned against the wall. The floor was cold through the soles of my shoes. "I'm in the ICU with Claire." A pause. Short, but full. "We saw the message. And your brother's payment is due today. It's not like we could—" "Dad," I said his name quietly. Not cutting him off, just placing it there, like a hand on someone's arm. "Do you know what her fever was when I brought her in?" Silence. "Do you know what the doctor said could happen if it didn't break?" He exhaled. "Sarah, don't make this into something. I'm not making it into anything. I'm telling you what was happening on my end while the group chat was asking me for $7,000. Your mother didn't know it was that serious. I said ICU, Dad. I said infection complication. What would have had to be serious enough? He went quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, he'd shifted his footing, the way he does when he's lost the argument, but isn't ready to admit it. You've always done well, Sarah. You've always been able to manage. And there it was. The sentence that had been running on a loop in the background of my entire adult life, so familiar I'd stopped hearing it. You've always done well. As if my ability to absorb things had eliminated my right to have a limit. As if doing well meant I was exempt from crisis. As if my competence was the same thing as consent. That's not the point, I said. Then what is the point? The point is that I looked at my daughter in a hospital bed and then I looked at my bank account and realized I have spent 3 years funding your retirement and thousands more on Derek's wedding. And the first communication I received after telling you Claire was in the ICU was a request for more money. I paused. That's the point. Silence. Longer this time. We can't cover the mortgage without that transfer, he said finally. His voice was different now, quieter. The compression was gone. What was left underneath sounded something like shame, though Frank Holloway would not have used that word. We budgeted around it, Sarah. We've been counting on it for a long time. I closed my eyes, because that was the moment. That was the moment the last piece landed. Not that they had needed my help. That part I had known. Not that my brother was irresponsible with money. I had known that too. What I hadn't let myself know, what I had worked very hard not to articulate even in my own private thoughts, was that I hadn't been a backup. I had been the primary source. I hadn't been a safety net. I had been the floor. And the floor was done. You'll need to make adjustments, I said. Sada, Dad, I love you. I'm not saying this to hurt you, but I will not discuss the transfer again while I am sitting in this hospital. If you want updates about Claire, I will send them, but the recurring payment has been cancelled and it won't be reinstated. I paused. I need you to hear that, and I need it to be the last time I say it. He breathed in slowly. The sound of a man recalibrating. Your mother is upset, he said finally. I'm not surprised. A beat. She loves you. I know she does. And I meant that. I meant it completely. That's the part that makes it hard. I hung up. I stood in the corridor for another moment, one hand flat against the cold wall, feeling the solidity of it. My hands were steady. I noticed that again. Steady. I had expected to be shaking. I wasn't. I walked back into Claire's room. The nurse on duty looked up and gave me a small nod. The monitor hummed its steady rhythm. And my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, who had asked me for apple juice the evening before and had no idea that the entire geography of her mother's life had just been quietly, permanently rearranged, my daughter opened her eyes. Mama. Just that. Just my name. But in her voice, it was the most complete sentence I had ever heard. Hey, Bug. I sat down beside her. Took her hand carefully, the one without the IV line. How are you feeling? She thought about it with the seriousness that 6-year-olds bring to questions about their own feelings. My throat hurts, she said finally. I know, the doctors are helping with that. Are you going to stay? I'm not going anywhere. She seemed to accept this. Her eyes drifted back toward the ceiling, then closed again. Her hand stayed in mine. My phone buzzed once. A message from an app I hadn't blocked. My mother had found a way around it, which I had anticipated. We'll talk about this later, Sarah. I read it. Set the phone face down on the chair. Maybe we would talk about it later. Maybe we would sit across from each other at some future kitchen table and work through all the layers of this, the years of silence about money, the gradual erosion of my separateness, the way love and financial dependency had been braided together so thoroughly that I wasn't sure either of us could tell where one ended and the other began. Maybe we would get there, but not today. Today I had a small hand in mine and a monitor with good numbers and a nurse who smiled at me without asking me to be okay. If you're still here, and if this story hit something in you, go ahead and hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it tells the algorithm this story matters, which means more people who need to hear it actually get to. Claire was discharged 4 days later. The infection had been bacterial, caught, treated, resolved. By the last day, she was sitting up in bed eating Jell-O and explaining to me, with great authority, that green was the best flavor and she didn't want to hear otherwise. I agreed with her completely. Driving home, I looked at her in the rearview mirror. She had her face turned toward the window, watching the city move past, and she was doing the thing she's done since she was a baby, quietly narrating what she sees. Not out loud, just her lips moving slightly, her eyes cataloguing the world. I have always loved that about her, the way she pays attention. I thought about what I was going to do next, not with my mother, not with Derek, not with the $7,000 that was never sent. I thought about what I was going to do with myself, the version of myself that had existed before that hospital chair. Because she was not coming back. I understood that now. The woman who had wired money before anyone finished asking, who had made herself so available that she'd become a resource instead of a person, she had been dissolved somewhere between 3 a.m. and that phone call in the corridor. And I did not miss her the way I thought I might. What I felt, driving home with my daughter's voice a quiet murmur in the backseat, was something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten it had a name. Relief. Not happiness. Relief is different. Relief is what you feel when you stop holding something you didn't realize you were holding. It moves through your body like a long exhale, like setting down something heavy you'd convinced yourself was weightless. In the weeks that followed, things were complicated in the way that complicated things tend to be. My mother called twice from a number I didn't recognize. I answered the second time because I decided that the conversation was going to happen eventually, and choosing the timing was the one form of control I had left. She was hurt. That was the first thing she said, and I believe she meant it. She was hurt that I had cancelled the transfer without warning, hurt that I had blocked her, hurt that I had been so cold about it. She did not mention the text message about the honeymoon. Not once. And I found that, in a way, more telling than anything she could have said. I let her talk. And when she was done, I said what I had spent 4 days deciding to say. Mom, I love you. And I need you to hear something that isn't an accusation. It's just the truth. For 3 years, I have sent $2,000 a month to you and Dad. That's $72,000. In the same 3 years, I have covered most of Derek's wedding costs and been asked to cover his honeymoon. I did all of that because I wanted to help and because I was raised to believe that family handles things together. But while Claire was in the ICU, the message I received from you wasn't asking how she was. It was asking for $7,000 more. And something shifted in me that I don't think is going to shift back. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than I was used to hearing. I didn't know it was that bad. I know you didn't, because I never told you. I kept saying yes until I didn't know how to say anything else. Another silence. I'm sorry, she said finally. Just that. No qualification, no pivot. 3 syllables and the most unguarded I had heard her in years. I accepted that, I held on to it. Not as resolution, we are far from resolution. There are years of pattern between us that 2 honest phone calls won't dismantle. But as a beginning, as a first stone placed in a road that might eventually lead somewhere better. My father called a week after that. He had found a part-time consulting arrangement through a former colleague. He sounded lighter than he had in months, which told me something about how much the financial pressure had been weighing on him too, even if neither of us had named it. He didn't ask about reinstating the transfer. He didn't mention the money at all. He asked how Claire was doing. She's great, I said. She told me this morning that she wants to be a marine biologist. He laughed. Actually laughed. Last month it was a chef. She's keeping her options open. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. It was the best phone call we'd had in longer than I can remember. Because for the first time in a long time, there was nothing underneath the conversation. No undercurrent. No waiting. Derek never called. He sent a text, 2 weeks after everything, that said, Mom said things got intense. Hope you're good. I responded with, we're okay. How was the trip? He sent back a photo of a beach and 2 sunglasses emojis. Some things don't change all at once. Some things change slowly, in the space of years, in the accumulation of small corrections and redirected patterns. I understand that. I am patient in the way that people are patient when they've stopped waiting for something that isn't coming. What changed completely, immediately, and without reservation was this. I stopped funding things I hadn't agreed to fund. I stopped filling silences that weren't mine to fill. I stopped mistaking my availability for love, because they are not the same thing, and I had confused them for so long that I'd built my identity around the confusion. I set up a savings account for Claire. I increased my own retirement contributions for the first time in 3 years. I booked a weekend trip, just the two of us, to a cabin near a lake, 2 hours from the city, and I did not mention it to anyone or ask permission or calculate how it would look. I just booked it. On the drive to that cabin, Claire fell asleep in the back seat before we'd even reached the highway. I drove in silence for a long time, watching the city give way to trees, and I thought about the version of myself who had sat in that hospital chair, who had looked at a text message and felt the floor shift, who had opened a banking app with steady hands and made a quiet, permanent decision. She wasn't gone. She was still me. But she was no longer the only me. There was room now. Room for a woman who booked the cabin without asking. Who let the phone ring? Who had learned, at 34 years old, that love is not a transaction and care is not a currency, and the people who truly need you will not require you to hollow yourself out to prove it. My daughter woke up when I pulled into the gravel lot near the cabin. She sat up, looked around at the trees, looked at me and said, "Is this where we're staying?" "It is." She pressed her face against the window. "There's a lake." "There is." "Can we swim?" "We can do whatever you want." She turned to look at me then, with the absolute, uncalculated certainty of a child who has never once had to question whether she was loved. "I want to show you how fast I can run on the dock." "Deal," I said, and I meant it. I meant it without condition, without calculation, without the quiet background hum of everything I was also managing. Just that, a dock, a lake, my daughter's feet, and the uncomplicated joy of watching her go. If you've ever been the person everyone else counted on, the one who managed things, funded things, absorbed things, and you've never let yourself admit how much that cost you, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not with guilt, not with resentment, just honestly. Because you are allowed to have limits. You are allowed to redirect. You are allowed to decide that the most important place your resources go is toward the life you are actually living. You don't have to wait for a hospital chair to figure that out. I did. But you don't have to. If this story reached you, if some part of it sounded like something you've been living, leave a comment below and tell me about it. Tell me about the moment you realized you'd been carrying something that wasn't yours. Or tell me you're still in the middle of it. I read everything. Every single one. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone who needs it. And I'll see you in the next one, which, I promise you, you will not be able to stop listening to until the very end. Take care of yourself, the real kind of taking care, the kind that starts from the inside.